All right, well, welcome back to the channel. I haven't posted in a minute. The month of October just kind of got away from me. I didn't get really any free time to step aside and sit down and share my thoughts on some of the movies I've seen. So, what I thought I'd do in this video is just give a brief, abridged version of my thoughts on some of the movies I've watched the month of October. I think I have 4 or 5 I'd like to talk about. Of course, I'm not going to go as in depth as I would have if I had given each of these movies their own video, but again, since this is one of the few chances I've had to sit down to talk, I don't have the time to do a separate video for each one. So this will just be a quick kind of summarized version of my thoughts of each of these films. With that being said, let's get into it. The first movie I saw in the month of October was Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and I have to be honest, I was not a fan of the first Venom movie, which I don't think I'm alone in that. It did make a lot of money, which is pretty common these days to see a movie that's based on like a pretty established property that even if it's not that good, it still makes a lot of money. My issue with the first movie, I just thought it was kind of tonally inconsistent. The pacing was weird. When it got to the climax, it didn't really feel like they had kind of naturally reached that part, and then the movie just ended. And it does kind of disappoint me that I had similar issues with Venom 2 Let There Be Carnage. The movie was very fast paced, although nothing happened. Like, I liked that they leaned into the movie being focused on the relationship between Eddie and Venom, and in that sense it was more tonally consistent. It was more like a buddy comedy than really an action movie, but it was a very fast-paced movie where nothing really felt like it was happening. It was like just a bunch of nothing scenes kind of progressing up to the end, where again, I didn't really feel like the climax was earned. It just kind of like, you know, some movies you can get away with just like having the movie just go and then it ends, but most movies have a traditional story arc where you have the rising action, you reach the climax, and then there's a falling action. With Venom 1 and 2, you didn't really get that, and it just felt like I felt like a sameness throughout the whole thing, if that kind of makes sense. I do appreciate Tom Hardy's acting, like when he's basically acting against nothing the whole movie. You know, I have to give him props for that. I like that it was a short movie, although this is one where I feel like having it be a little bit longer might have helped with the pacing a little bit and maybe had the climax feel more natural and more earned. I also feel like they wasted quite a few characters in this movie. Carnage was barely in it until like the very end. Shriek was barely in it at all. She didn't really do anything. If I'm going to be honest, the best part of this movie was the post-credit scene, which I'm not going to spoil, but it's a game changer, and whenever I think about this movie, I only remember the post-credit scene. Nothing else from the rest of it kind of stood out. It's not a bad movie. I still had a fun time, but I still have a lot of issues with it. I think that the Venom movies have been just kind of inherently flawed from the beginning, but again, with that post-credit scene, I am very intrigued to see where they go from there. Next up on my list is No Time to Die, Daniel Craig's fifth and final James Bond movie. Now, this one I really wanted to give its own video, but again, like I said, I just didn't have that much time this month to sit down. This movie is pretty sentimental to me. I've seen all the Daniel Craig James Bond movies in theaters, all 5 of them. Casino Royale came out when I was 13, and I'm now a 28-year-old, I might not look like it, but full-grown man. I've grown up with Daniel Craig as James Bond, and so he is my James Bond when I think of, every generation has their own, but he's the one that sticks out to me. I thought this movie was great. The action sequences were phenomenal. I think it's some of the best action scenes that we've gotten in a Daniel Craig James Bond movie. What I liked about it was that all the action sequences felt that they made minimal use of CGI, like everything on the screen was real and practical, and that really keeps you in it. Daniel Craig crushed the acting as always. I don't feel like you had to have seen all of Daniel Craig's James Bond movies to have gotten this one. This is more of a direct sequel to Spectre, though they do reference events from the other movies, specifically Casino Royale, so if you haven't seen that one, some of the stuff at the beginning of this movie might not make sense, but if you've seen at least Spectre, you should be fine. One thing that really intrigued me about this movie when I was watching the opening credits was that they had Hans Zimmer do the music, which, James Bond has a very iconic theme. Like, I didn't see what having Hans Zimmer do the music would, change, but it really actually did enhance the movie. Like, you can tell that, it's the James Bond theme, but it's like, I can't really put my finger on it. It's just enhanced. It sounded a lot better, and it really worked to kind of amp up the action sequences. So No Time to Die was great. I thought it was a fitting conclusion to Daniel Craig's tenure as James Bond. It's not perfect, but it's a good time, so I would definitely recommend watching it. The next movie is not one I probably would have gone out of my way to watch if my friend Nick hadn't recommended it to me, and that is The Guilty, which is streaming on Netflix. And the plot of this movie is that Jake Gyllenhaal is a cop who's been demoted to working a phone line, a 911 emergency hotline, due to some sort of event that's recently happened in his past that's caused him to be demoted. The movie picks up after he's already been moved into the different role, and so throughout the movie, they just kind of sprinkle in like hints of what happened in his past that got him to this point, which I think is a really interesting plot structure when you factor in that the movie also essentially all takes place in like one or two rooms, and Jake Gyllenhaal is really the only other character. There's like two or three other characters in the room with him that sort of are crucial to the film, but not really. All the other important characters we only hear him talk to over the phone, which again, I think is a really interesting concept for doing a movie. I mean, the draw of this is Jake Gyllenhaal. Like, it rests on his acting ability, and I think he did a great job. I would say I would have liked to have seen more of his backstory. Again, they just kind of sprinkle it in throughout, and then at the end, it's just like, all right, here's what happened. It just didn't feel, it felt kind of like rushed at the end. There is an interesting plot twist close to the end of this film. I'm not going to say what it is, of course, but that does kind of recontextualize some of the stuff that's been going on up till that point. So if you have Netflix, I think it's a decent watch. It's a pretty short movie, again, only about 90 minutes, so it's not going to take up too much of your time. But if you like Jake Gyllenhaal, then he should be enough to make you want to see this movie. Huge movie next up on my list is Dune, which I have actually seen twice. I watched this once on my big screen TV in my basement, and then another time just on my iPad with headphones in, which I always feel like I need to do sometimes with these movies that have like the audio visual component as like the big draw of it, because sometimes I can't hear like what the actors are saying. I had the same issue with Tenet late last year, and so I had to do the same with this one. I never read Dune or any of its sequels, so I don't have too much of like a connection to this. I'm not familiar with the lore, and I definitely felt the first time I watched this movie, I didn't like miss anything, but they give you just the bare minimum of what you need to understand if you haven't read the books. If you've read the books, I feel like everything that they reference, even if it's just in passing, like you'll know the backstory and all the details and the lore to kind of fill in the blanks. But for someone like me, the bare minimum worked, but the second time watching it, I definitely picked up on a lot more little things with the world building that made me understand the story more. I liked this movie a lot the first time I watched it, don't get me wrong. The visuals are probably the best in any movie I've seen this year. Same thing with the score, it's outstanding, which all of Denis Villeneuve's movies are like that. The second time I watched this, though, it really enhanced the experience for me. I was able to pick up on what they were saying. I am super pumped that they've greenlit a sequel. It would have been really disappointing if we had only gotten half of the book in film form. So I think if you've never read the books, you'll enjoy it. If you have, I think it's a pretty faithful adaptation. Full disclosure, though, I will just say it is a bit of a slow burn. It's not a standard traditional sci-fi action film. It is more, it's like, the best way I can put it is it's Game of Thrones in space. It's very politically inclined. There's super deep themes that they explore with politics and the environment and things like that. It's not like a Star Trek or anything like that, or like a Star Wars where it's more actiony. This is really a slow movie with great action scenes, don't get me wrong, but I am looking forward to the sequel where there's supposedly going to be more action. But if you haven't seen Dune, I would highly, highly recommend. Okay, and the last movie I watched in October, which I actually just watched yesterday, so it's pretty fresh in my mind, and that is Army of Thieves, which is streaming on Netflix. This is a prequel to the Zack Snyder film that got released earlier in the year, Army of the Dead. I think that's what it's called, which I never got around to reviewing. So just real quick, I did roughly enjoy that movie. I'm not really into zombie movies, but after the Snyder Cut, I've kind of moved Zack Snyder into that top tier of directors for me, where any movie he directs, I'll go see. This was not directed by him. It was produced by him, so it is It has the same tone and fits. Like I appreciated that it had the same tone and kind of feel of Army of the Dead, although it's a prequel. The director of this movie is actually the main character. So this movie focuses on the German guy whose name I forget. I think it's Sebastian or Dieter. I think they talk about how he has like a fake name as well, who's the vault cracker guy in the first one, the Army of the Dead. And so this focuses on his life shortly before the events of the zombie apocalypse in Army of the Dead, where he's learning how to hone his skills to do something. And so it focuses on his story. And like I said, the guy who plays him also directed it. So I wasn't sure how that would pan out, and I think he did a fine job. This movie had a tough task of making cracking into vaults exciting and interesting, because I mean, the only way that you really do that, which they show in the movie, is by the people like putting their ear up to the vault and like twisting the lock. But every time he does that in the film, we see the inside of the vault, and there's some really cool animation, which is very Zack Snyder-esque with the special effects. It's nothing flashy, but it looks good. And each one is different, and you see how when he twists it, all the different pieces move. Each vault is like its own character, which I really liked. So I applaud the film for being able to make safe cracking exciting. And the film, it was nothing bad. Like it's not going to really stand out to me. It wasn't like a game-changing film or anything like that. The main character is likable, but super annoying a lot of the times. Like he's never unlikable, but he's really like socially awkward, but up to a point where it can get borderline unlikable, but it just toes the line between annoying and unlikable. So he's always likable, but super annoying sometimes, and he can get a little bit much at sometimes. But overall, the film I thought was good. It leads right up to the beginning of Army of the Dead, and to my knowledge, I think they're gonna make like some sort of universe out of this story. So yeah, I like that it was in the same tone as Army of the Dead. Did I like it more or less? It's kind of hard for me to say. I'll have to do some reflection on it. But if you have Netflix and you've seen Army of the Dead, I would give Army of Thieves a watch. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, so there it is, my October movie update. I, again, apologize for not being able to do separate videos for each of those movies individually. I probably would have gone more in depth. Hopefully next month in November, I'll be able to find more time to sit down and do videos on individual movies and things like that. But for now, this is the best I can do. So I really appreciate you all taking the time to sit down and listen to my ramblings on these films. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and be sure to stay tuned for more.